So I get a lot of injuries about how to rehab and rehabilitate different injuries so that you can return to training and then get even stronger and hit new PRs. So I thought today that I'd go through my own experience rehabilitating my shoulder from the point of not being able to put a t-shirt on properly all the way up to benching 150 kilos again, and the different processes and methods that went into that. Now, although the specific exercises and challenges along the way can be different with, different injury to injury, the same sort of processes and principles still apply. Now, disclaimer, I am not a doctor or physical therapist, so this is not medical advice. And just like I did when I first got my injury, I recommend that you go and see a physio or a relevant medical professional so that you can have their input on this as well. My own expertise and experience really picks up where physios leave off once you've been cleared to return to training, so we can get you back up to training to the level you were at and then continue on past that to get even stronger. Now, some quick context on my injury. So I had a strain of the ligaments in my AC joint, so that's that little pointy bit up at the end of your collarbone where that joins onto what's called your acromion process, which is like a little finger that sticks up from the top of your shoulder blade and joins up there. So I didn't have a full tear or anything, so you can like tear that off the bone or tear the ligament in half, but what I had was some looseness in that joint, which means that my collarbone was pretty much kind of like popping up, and you could see it and you could feel it as it pulled away from the end of the acromion process. Now, this was super uncomfortable, and over time, if you don't rehab it properly, you can end up with that joint being loose permanently, and then that'll just slowly wear away the cartilage because the joints faces aren't meeting like they're supposed to, and then you can end up with permanent pain and injury there. Now, I think what caused it was I was pushing the range of motion on a few exercises too aggressively. So I've always had pretty poor shoulder mobility, and so it's something that I've continued to work on and chip away at. And I went through a phase of training where I was doing some extended range of motion push-ups, so doing push-ups on kettlebells, sort of trying to get deeper into it, and then also doing an exercise called skinning the cat, where you like flip upside down through a bar. Both are great shoulder mobility exercises, but I think I was just pushing them too hard, too fast. And instead of my muscles stretching and getting more mobility, it just ended up pulling apart my AC joint. So step one, after realizing that there was something wrong with my shoulder that wasn't just going to go away in a day, was to book in to see a physio. Although I had a pretty good idea of what was going on, it's always good to get the relevant medical professionals' input to make sure that there isn't anything that you don't know that you don't know, and that you're not taking into account there, because that is their job to assess these situations and to see what else is going on. So when I went to see the physio, he reassured me that I hadn't completely torn it, and that there wasn't any need for surgery or completely immobilizing it or anything, and he gave me a few light movements that I could start down my path with rehab. Step two was figuring out how I could train to keep the rest of my body moving whilst I was waiting for my shoulder to recover. So I couldn't do anything that put pressure on it, so nothing where I had like pads on the shoulders, like a hack squat or like a calf press, calf raises or anything like that, and I couldn't do anything where there was a lot of weight hanging from my hand, so any sort of deadlifts or carries or anything that was kind of pulling on that arm was out of the question. So machines really became my friend over this time, with leg presses and hamstring curls and all the other leg exercises that we could do without having to use my upper body at all. And then I also found that if I kept my arm in kind of quite a neutral position, I could do tricep pushdowns, and then I could also do bicep curls with like light weight and high reps, so that I could still get the muscles moving, but I wasn't putting a lot of load through that shoulder. And as long as I was kind of consciously making sure that I kept that trap relaxed and I wasn't starting to do anything weird with it, then we were all fine there. I also introduced some blood flow restriction training, or BFR, which is basically where you have a cuff that cuts off some of the blood flow, and basically means that you can use lighter weights but still get a good stimulus. And so this allowed me to, again, just have less strain on the shoulder if it was upper body movements, or even for lower body movements, I didn't kind of have to hold myself into the machines as firmly as if I was using more weight. Now, step three is sort of figuring out what you can actually do with the affected area. So with any sort of injury, this is going to be governed by a term called graded exposure, which basically means you're going to do what you can with it that doesn't irritate it or aggravate it, and you're going to keep doing that until that becomes easier, and then you can do more without further aggravating it. Now, doing more could mean adding more weight, could mean doing more reps, it could mean doing more total sets throughout the week, it could also mean doing the movement throughout a greater range of motion, or it could mean moving to a more challenging movement. So for example, I found out that I could do some light rows as long as I kept my shoulders in a relatively neutral position, not letting them come forward or pulling them back too hard. And then if I didn't let my arms go all the way out, so I stopped kind of just short of the end of the row, and then I didn't pull them all the way in, stopped kind of just short there. And as long as I kept it with a relatively light weight, I kept it quite a high repetition so that the muscles were still working. And then I also did it at a speed where I wasn't kind of really heaving it around. I was just slowly going through it in a controlled manner. That felt okay. I might get a little bit of soreness during, but nothing excessive, and it was able to kind of recover and progress from there. And then over time, I was able to slowly let the range of motion out a little bit further, add a little bit more weight, start to take it a little bit close to failure, all kind of sequentially adding these things as I felt like it was coping more and more with what I was already doing with it. Now, often with this sort of thing, less can be more. So just doing even like 1 or 2 sets once or twice a week with it, and then doing that for a week or so, and if then that's fine, then you can like add a set the following week, add a few more reps, take the weight a little bit heavier, slowly start to move it closer to failure, so less repetitions in reserve, and kind of slowly progress it from there, but always staying on the more conservative side of things. The last thing that you want to do is add in a brand new exercise and suddenly do like 1,000,000 sets one day a week, or suddenly just like add it in every single day. Like, give it time to bed in and kind of see how it's coping with it, see how it feels a couple of hours after, see how it feels the next day, and then you can start to gain some confidence that that is working well and that you can build on top of that. Now, one thing to consider in all of this is to be able to work within sort of a low pain range. So some discomfort is fine in the affected area when you're doing the movement or even sort of immediately afterwards, but you don't want it to be excessively sore either during or afterwards, or to suddenly come up with a whole bunch of swelling or anything, in which case you've probably overcooked it a little bit, and then we need to take a step back, let it recover for a couple of days, kind of go take a step down to whatever the last thing you're working on was, and then slowly reintroduce it from there. Now, especially in the early stages, don't feel like you have to take the exercises close to failure. Leaving at least 5 repetitions in reserve, so that means you could do at least 5 more reps with the given weight that you're doing, is the best way to go, as this is hard enough that it's going to provide a good stimulus for it to start to recover, but not too hard that you're likely to overcook it and then have to take time off and kind of do, 1 step forward, 2 steps back on the process. Now, if you attack it like this, going nice and conservatively, you will have plenty of notice if you are starting to overdo it slightly, and they can then sort of pull back so that you can sort of undulate how you're addressing it rather than having a setback and going back several steps because you've aggravated it again. As long as you're making progress sort of week to week or every couple of weeks, you're going to be able to build on that and really consistently make good progress and get back to where you were with your training. Now, if you progress things conservatively and slowly like this, you'll have plenty of warning if you're starting to overdo it a bit. And this way you can sort of just undulate your effort. If you feel like you're starting to overdo it slightly, you can pull back instead of completely overcooking it and then having a setback and being pushed back several steps. As long as you're making progress sort of every week or every couple of weeks, then you're heading in the right direction. Now, quick disclaimer, obviously these guidelines are different for different injuries, so please talk to your relevant medical professional about what guidelines are appropriate for the injury that you are currently working. Now, in this process, exercise machines are your friends. They're machines as long as they move in a way that's comfortable for you, so the path that they take and you can adjust it to fit your body size. They provide a lot of stability and safety for you to slowly sort of reintroduce movements to the area again. For instance, when I first started doing pressing exercises again, which was one of the more challenging things with the injury I had, I started with machine chest press, and similar to the rows, I was able to do it sort of quite low load, high reps, not too close to failure, kind of reducing the range of motion, doing them nice and controlled, initially not pushing all the way out or bringing all the way back in, just moving within a range of motion that was comfortable. Now from there, it has just been a case of slowly exposing the area to more and more challenging things. So slowly increasing the weight on the machines I was using, starting to add in more challenging movements like machine overhead press, slowly progressing those from machine-based stuff back to free weight stuff with barbells and dumbbells. Again, each time I kind of make a change, making sure that I reintroduce something at a low volume, so like low sets, low reps, or like low total reps across a week, far away from failure, really conservatively, then gaining confidence as the joint begins to tolerate it again more, and then being able to ramp it up from there. And basically over the last year and a half, I've been able to take it from not being able to do anything to being back up to next week, or 2 weeks, I should be able to bench 150 kilos again, which is only 5 kilos off my all-time PB. Now here are a few things that I think people regularly get wrong with this. Number 1 is expecting overnight results. And different injuries take different amounts of time. I see too many people try and rehab something for say 6 to 12 weeks, get frustrated with it, that it's not back up to 100%, and then just assume that they are never going to be able to do that again. Now, it has taken about a year and a half for me to get from sort of ground zero again to back up to performing almost where I was before, and it's still not 100%. Like, I still have to be a little bit more careful with it than I used to be, but I'm sure in time, given it another year or so, it'll slowly just kind of fade from my memory until it is something that I just don't have to think about anymore. A lot of these tissues just take a lot longer to repair than we expect them to. And I've seen the same thing with many of my clients with different backs, knees, hips, ankles. Often about 50% of the function comes back relatively quickly, and you can, move around your house and dress yourself and do all those sorts of things. But the next 50% kind of getting back up towards performing where you were, and then even getting to, pushing PBs, takes a little bit longer. Now, this can be a little bit frustrating and kind of feel like you're watching paint dry, but if you don't stick with it, then you're never going to get there. So the next area where I see people go wrong is expecting it to be a linear process. Now, even if you were able to work out exactly the rate of progress and only introduce things at the perfect time again, there are still going to be times when your injury takes a step back. And what you need to do is just dial back what you're doing a little bit, go back to what it can tolerate, and then slowly build up from there. Now, it's quite normal because, we don't want to be going slower than we have to with this, to occasionally kind of overstep or push it a little bit too hard. And again, that's fine. It's normal. It's part of the process. We can dial back and then slowly build up from there. Now, the last thing that I see people tripping up on is that pain does not necessarily mean damage. You can have damage without pain, and you can have pain without damage. Part of the process of rehabbing an injury is helping the specific tissue to heal, but part of it is also regaining an appropriate level of sensitivity in the area. So this method of slowly exposing it not only helps the tissue to heal, but it also helps to desensitize that area until you have sort of a normal level of sensitivity in that area again, and what should be painful is painful, and what necessarily doesn't need to be painful is no longer painful. Now, again, talk to your medical professional about what an appropriate level of pain or discomfort for your specific injury is. But for me, allowing about a 2 to 4 out of 10 on the pain scale, either during an exercise or immediately after, so it was sort of uncomfortable, but it didn't feel like I was aggravating it, was an appropriate level where if I was consistently doing that and just allowing a 2 to 4, then I was able to kind of progress week to week, and it was getting better. Now, also with different injuries, different sensations, different types of pain can mean different things. So again, talk to your physio, talk to your doctor, speak with them about how it's feeling, the different types of pain you're getting, have some open communication there, and that's going to be your best chance to sort of navigate through this and rehab you back to where you want to be. Now, this is a huge topic, but I hope that this has been helpful. The biggest thing I can say is that your body can do amazing things, and given enough time and the appropriate training, I'm sure that you will be able to return to the things you love doing in some shape, form, or size. So don't be disheartened, stick with the process, and if anything, every time I've had to rehab a personal injury of mine, it has improved my training methods, and my training has been even better following that. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to comment them below or to message me, and I'm happy to help you figure out what the next steps that you should be taking are.